Nikhil's Vinya is a top 25 influencer in customer success, a leadership expert, best-selling author. He's done everything in customer success from being a CSM, manager, director, VP. And for the last 6 years, he's been consulting with some of the best in SaaS to help them build world-class customer success teams. Today, Nils and I are going to be diving into leadership. Thanks so much for joining me today, Nils.
Hey, my pleasure, Ben. Honored to be here.
Excellent. Well, to start off with, you recently wrote a book on leadership. Can you tell us a bit about what it is, who it's for, what people can learn from it?
Absolutely. So the book is called 30-Day Leadership Playbook, Your Guide to Becoming the Leader You've Always Wanted to Be. And it is written for leaders everywhere at all stages of their leadership career, whether you're hoping to get into a leadership role in the future and you haven't really had a lot of experience. Maybe you're just starting out in leadership. Maybe you've been doing and running and leading teams for a while, or maybe you're a seasoned executive. The principles that I cover in 30-Day Leadership Playbook apply to anybody in any leadership position. And it's been just an amazing response that I've received from the audience and people who have purchased the book and said how much it made sense to them, how easy it was to read, how fun it was to hear some of the stories and be able to apply some of these things right away. So all in all, it's been a wonderful launch and exciting time here as we get to the end of 2020.
Did you feel like there was something, to go a little further into the book, did you feel like there was something that people weren't covering from a leadership perspective in other things, or was there just kind of one specific or some specific things that you felt were unique to your approach to leadership you wanted to get across, or mix of both?
Yeah, I've always been someone who, for lack of a better term, cuts through the noise. I can't do fluff. Like I literally cannot write about it. I can't speak it. It just does not work. And so in a lot of the material that's out there, books, programs, all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of theory, and theory plays an important part, but it is not everything, right? Most important for me in everything I do in the customer success field and everything I do in the leadership field is about action. Right? If I can take something as nebulous as the term leadership, break it down into small enough chunks for anybody to understand and apply in their situation, I know I can help them on their journey to becoming the leader they always wanted to be. And that makes me feel really good because I know if they use those leadership skills, they're going to not only improve their life, they're also going to improve the lives of others, the people on their team, the people in their families, their friends, because frankly, it's easy to do if you know what to do. But most times it's too big of a concept or too mysterious of a thing, leadership, right? For anybody to break it down and do anything meaningful. So I wanted to take something big, chunk it down into really small pieces and give people actionable advice to put in place.
I love that. Yes. Cutting through the fluff is always the best approach, especially now when we're bombarded with fluff, and it's, finding the non-fluff stuff in the first place is hard enough to do.
That's right. 100%. The amount of information that exists in our digital world alone is phenomenal, which is a blessing and a curse, right? It's a blessing because you can access anything, and it's a curse for the same reason. So, as we progress and as we continue to evolve in the education space, there's going to be a greater and greater level of importance placed on solving specific problems and doing that in a succinct way that gets to the heart of the issue that people are facing. Frankly, I've faced an awful lot of leadership issues through my entire career, and bringing that to the surface, or bringing that to this book and giving people a chance to see that and learn from that was something really important to me, because I know I can shortcut anybody's learning path immensely if they are able to learn some of the things that I have learned and follow some of these practices.
That's fantastic. So when we talk about leadership skills, you mentioned that it's nebulous. It's sort of an umbrella term, and in some ways there's a lot that can go into that bucket. Does leadership, and the skills that it takes to be a great leader, does that evolve and change over time with technology, with culture, with things like that, or does it kind of stay the same, and it's kind of these core skills that are the same 50 years ago and are the same today?
Yeah, the skills do evolve somewhat over time, but at a much slower pace, right? The application of the skills is what I think changes and evolves the fastest. However, the principles remain the same. So in the book, I break down leadership into 4 main pillars: leading yourself, leading others, leading with communication, and leading with metrics. So in these 4 areas, you can imagine that the concepts that I'm going to talk about in the leading yourself pillar are going to be the same and just as relevant now as they are in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, and probably were 10, 20, 30 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all psychology based. It's everything
Right.
that's about you, right? When we talk about leading others, some of the things that I talk about have been around for a very long period of time. The question is, has anybody who reads the book, have you, seen this concept presented in this way with this kind of example and this kind of concrete action that just makes sense to you? And maybe it's my book, maybe it's somebody else's book, but the key is that you're able to take something out of it and put it in place. So the application over time is absolutely going to evolve. I mean, look at 2020,
Yeah.
right? Now have fully remote teams in most every company that exists that can support it. And you have a situation where it was really easy to build rapport. It was really easy to give feedback when you were in person. It's not so easy to do when you're over the phone or in a video conference, right?
Yep.
And so while the core skill of giving feedback or building rapport is still the same, you have to do it in a different way given the medium that you have available to you. And it doesn't mean that it's any harder or easier, it's just different.
Yep.
And that's why the principles will remain the same, but the application is going to be different over time.
Definitely. Yeah, touched on a good point. COVID, I think, changed a lot of things about managers and the way we manage or even communicate. I think that I've been saying, I think Slack needs a sarcasm flag, like with some natural language processing or something, because a number of times that I've been talking with a colleague and they're saying something sarcastic and I'm taking them seriously and I just get really confused. It's way too high.
100%. And that's part of our evolving in communication, in leadership, is figuring out those nuances, right? The communication is still important. What you're talking about in Slack is still the same as if you were in person. However, you have to learn a new way to pick up on that wasn't there before.
Definitely. How else has COVID impacted, or other certain impact leadership in particular, maybe certain skills or certain things that people were not doing or taking advantage of before that they had to get really good at real quick?
So the remote first companies had a huge leg up on this over everybody. And there are a number of notable companies that are out there that have been remote first, always were, always will be. And they had things dialed in to such a great level of detail that they could onboard somebody from anywhere in the world and it wouldn't really matter. Right? What the rest of the world got thrown into was, how do I do that in a short amount of time? So what it did was take something that could be fairly vague. Let's say, did everybody understand this update in the process change that we made? Right? That might be covered in person in a small group meeting that you happen to grab a bunch of people together and just have a little chat with, right? Well, in the COVID world, you can't do that anymore. So what do we have to do? You have to put a little bit more structure behind that communication and that confirmation that everybody saw that. So that means that there's actually a place in Notion or in Slack or somewhere where your system of record stuff resides for how you operate your team and your policies and procedures. And then there's an actual thing that somebody has to comment to say, I saw this and I agree. Right? So it's taking the synchronous communication and turning it into asynchronous communication. And I think that's where the biggest opportunity for gain was and is and will be in the future. And that's probably one of the biggest hang-up points that I've seen people hit, is that it takes more effort, right?
Yeah.
The result, though, is a far more consistent experience and a much better experience for everybody. And frankly, even if the world comes back into an in-person environment, you should probably still bring these principles back, because that's really the best way to make sure things get done.
It's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before, but I mean, taking a pretty optimistic approach. I feel like everyone in customer success is an optimist.
They have to be.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like it's sort of like athletes who go to high altitudes to train, right? And then when they come back down to sea level, they're running that much farther, that much faster. Let's hope that that's what we get out of COVID, right? Because we have to get so much better at communicating and following up and chasing things down. Hopefully when we all kind of come back together, we've got this extra layer, this extra skill set. We'll all be super communicators or something like that when we're face-to-face.
I hope so, because it would make the world of difference. I mean, just in when you can say things conversationally and have a quick 2-second chat with somebody and say, yeah, I got it, right? Yeah, that feels good. But to be completely honest, like, it's the easy way out. You didn't have to do anything. All you did was turn around, say, hey, did you do this? And yeah, I did it. right? There's no systemization behind that. So what happens the next time that happens? You have to do the same thing. And there's always going to be a reliance on that. And frankly, the tribal knowledge level will grow, right? COVID is an incredible time to take stock and take that level of tribal knowledge down to the place where it's manageable, so that when you bring somebody new into your organization, they're not fighting for months just trying to get the here's how this place works scenario. They actually have a blueprint of everything they need and the resources, the timelines, all the good stuff, and how to communicate with the team. And I think that's really a blessing in what's coming out of all this.
Definitely. I absolutely agree. Talking about things that trip people up, what's something that you've seen first-time managers often get tripped up by?
So one of the biggest transitions anybody will ever make in their professional career is going from an individual contributor to a manager. And the reason for that is that there's a fundamental shift in mindset and behavior that goes from managing yourself, which you have complete control over, right? Nobody else really can factor into that, to managing other people, where you are now responsible for other people getting work done. Right? And so that shift is essentially all about putting yourself on the side and focusing your energy and attention to help other people do their job. And that fundamental shift is what causes the biggest transition pain point when going from an individual contributor to a manager. So anybody in that first-time manager role who's struggling with that has to first, number one, nail the psychology part, which is it's not about me, it's about my team. And number two, recognize that their role, the sole thing, if I had to boil it down to one sentence of what a leader does, it's do everything possible to make sure that his or her team is successful, right? And that will clear the decks, right? All of a sudden, everything comes into view. Well, wait, we have to get to here. It's not about how I know how to do this because I was the most successful individual contributor on this team, so therefore they put me into management. It's not about using or imposing your way of doing things on everybody else. It's about you have this great expertise. You were able to do this better than everybody else. That's wonderful. However, right now, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, can you facilitate them getting to that same level in their own way, right? And so that is probably the biggest challenge I faced myself. Many hundreds of others have faced as well. And the surest antidote is start with psychology, recognize it's not about you, and then two, focus everything on ensuring others are successful.
It's a hard one. And the more I've learned about being a manager, the more I'm like, maybe I want to stay in IC for a long time, just because I love going off in my little world and doing my stuff. And, I love to collaborate, but being a manager does not necessarily mean success. Being a manager should not always be the career trajectory for everybody. What's some advice that you would give for someone like me about, when I'm pondering if that's the route that I do want to go or not?
Single most important thing is to focus on what you are most talented to do. In other words, focus on your strengths. I use the term strengths. It comes from the Strengths Finder assessment. Got a whole chapter in the book dedicated to claiming your strengths. One of the most important aspects that you can do from a leadership perspective. Again, as I wrote the book, this was not just for people in managing hundreds of people in an organization, right? You yourself, you are in a leadership position because you are responsible for influencing all kinds of other people inside your company, as well as in the customer success community. That 100% is a leadership position. So the more that you can focus on what you are naturally talented to do, the greater the output will be with the least amount of effort. That's where the fun happens. This is where you are engaged at the highest level. You are delivering at the highest level. Your company is getting the value of you at the highest level. And everything just frankly is a whole lot of fun. So it does not matter if you are technically in a management position or in an individual contributor position. The greatest contribution that you will make is in doing work that is aligned with your strengths. And you are clearly already doing that because you're very good at your job. I can hear that you love to do it and have a passion for it. Therefore, I know that you're in a really good place. And being in a management position where that you get put on the back burner doesn't sound like it might, at this point in time, really align well with your strengths and where you are. And it might make you less happy overall. And that would be a real detriment because your output and your productivity and your feeling, your level of comfort in what you're doing would be lower. And that's that's not gonna work, right? So
Yeah,
if we look at everybody in a organization, a team, a company, right? Everybody through the lens of their strengths, and if we had a team, an organization, whatever, with people who are all aligned doing work that is lined up with their strengths, the sky's the
that's the
limit.
magic.
Like, absolutely no limit. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And I
100%.
love the way that you put it around, getting to that flow state or getting to, a place where you're maximizing your strengths. That's where you get you said, I think the greatest output for the littlest input.
Yep.
And I
Right.
think that's a great way to view it, especially just from more an objective, if you're taking an objective approach to it.
Well,
And some people, the least amount of input and max output will be having them in a manager role to power other people. And then other people, it's a hybrid, or it's fully as an IC.
100%. Yeah, that's this in its simplest form. Like, we are all wired to see the world and do things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest risk that you can take on is to go against what you are naturally talented to do.
Mm-hmm.
That is just guaranteed friction.
Yeah.
And friction does not mean is not good for anybody, you or your organization, your team. So the more alignment that you have, the smoother it will be, and you see things. And frankly, a lot of people, when I coach people through strengths and do some smaller group or one-on-one work, the resounding question is always, sometimes they feel guilty. It's because they're able to do this work in like a fraction of the time that it would take somebody else. And you can sometimes feel like, oh, that was so easy for me. But the reality is that's what we need to do more of. Because if we do more of that, the output level just continuously, exponentially gets bigger. And ultimately, that's what we're all after.
Yeah, absolutely. Lean into your strengths. And I think, culturally, we are brought up to, and we're told to compensate for our weaknesses instead of doubling down on our strengths. And the magic happens when people double down on their strengths. Like, why would you not lean into that and lean into this other thing? And I mean, there's not to say there's not some great things to be well-rounded, but I think, you make a great point that it's, the magic is doubling down on your strengths and having a team composed of people with different strengths.
100%. And there are complementary strengths in every group of individuals. And when the team as a whole, and the leader especially, understands how those strengths intertwine, you stop looking at things in terms of time. You stop looking at things in terms of who has the ability to take on this project, and you start looking at things in terms of who has the best strengths to align with the work that needs to be done. Because we could do this project and it could take 10 hours, or I could have one person who is aligned with this, with their strengths, with this work that needs to get done, and they could probably do it at a higher level in 2 hours. That's the way I want to go, and that's a strengths-based leadership approach.
Nice. I love that. One of the difficult things about being a team leader is, again, especially now, you're responsible for supporting your team, the success of your team, and something that is inexplicably tied to anyone's success is their mental health and wellness. So what do you recommend that managers can be doing now to ensure that they are supporting the mental health and wellness of their teams remotely?
The same level of connection still needs to be there in some form or fashion. Right? So this is about really understanding from a place of genuine curiosity and genuine care where your team members are, how they're feeling, what they're going through, what some of the challenges are. And this takes skill, because you have to get people to let their guard down behind a screen, right? And it takes a little bit of time and getting used to, but if you ask the questions in a genuine caring way, in a genuine curiosity way, people will respond. Right? And that's a huge part of a leadership role, period, but especially in a remote environment, to be able to connect at that same level and make sure that you understand kind of the big picture of what's going on in that person's life. Are they doing well? Are they really struggling? And then comes back to making them successful. That might be in something outside directly of the project and the customers that they manage. How can you help make them successful in some other part of their life? Right? Do they need additional guidance or direction? Do they need to connect with somebody else in your network? Right? What do they need? And so that same lens of looking at things from how do I make other people successful is even more important now than ever, so that you can have that, mental health check on where's my team at? How are they doing? How frustrated are they? When are we getting back together? All those questions are swimming around. And if you don't bring it to the table and you don't bring it up and give it some light and give it some air and have it just a, open discussion about it, then there's going to be a lot of uncertainties and fears and doubts that creep in, or assumptions made that you don't care. Right? All you do as a leader is focus on the numbers, and all you do is want to know where is this account and who's going to renew. Right? That's part of it, right? But the bigger part in terms of ultimately getting people to produce at the highest level is understanding the motivations and the drivers and the current mental state of your team. When you understand that and you can align their work to the strengths and help them see that, then things change.
Absolutely. I think awesome points. I think tying it all to the success of the team and always coming back to that as almost sort of the first principle, like is a really great approach. And like you said, even it could be something unrelated to work, but maybe you can help with their network. You never know what the stress points are in someone's life, but it always impacts their work. Last question for you. When you initially start coaching a leader, what's the most common issue? So I'm thinking for people watching this, who might think what they're doing is perfect, or might think that they need to work on what they're doing, but aren't sure where to start. What's kind of the most common thing that you see across all sorts of leaders at organizations?
So there's been a lot of topics that have helped leaders with. They probably bucket into a couple key things. Number one, they want to save time, right? Spend an awful lot of time with their teams, getting pulled in a million different directions. We know that CS leaders are notorious for this. If you're in back-to-back meetings all day and you wear it as a badge of honor, there's a better way to do things. Trust me. Okay, save time. Inspire their team is another big one, right? We want to all build high-performing teams. So we want to have people who are doing work without us looking over their shoulder. Like that's like, the holy grail in some of the leadership stuff is like, you just have this incredible team that is driven, that is motivated, that is just rocking and rolling, exceeding their targets. Like that's like so there's this vision that they want to achieve. They don't exactly always know how. And then get promoted. Right? If you are in a leadership position, you absolutely 100% should always be thinking about how to move to the next level. Even if you're an individual contributor, what is the next place for me? Where am I going? What are the skills that I'm going to have to acquire in order to position myself as the absolute number one most qualified person for an opportunity like this, if this comes up at my company, or maybe there's something else that comes up at another company. But being in control and being in the driver's seat and really being the CEO of your career, it goes into that getting promoted bucket. So those three, I would say, are the three biggest areas: saving time, inspiring your team, and getting promoted.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, Niels, thank you so much for sharing all your excellent advice today. I look
pleasure.
forward to checking out your book, and hopefully everyone watching does as well.
Sounds good. And if you want to get a copy of the book, all you need to do is go to 3030dayleadership.com/playbook. And you can grab a copy for a limited time. It's only $10, and I'm including over $200 in free bonuses.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye-bye.